acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on where I'm located in Melbourne, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And to welcome you as well to this webinar about innovations in workplace giving. And I'll introduce our fantastic panellists in a moment, but I just quickly wanted to do a recap about what the webinar is about. I think you probably know what it's about, given that you're here, but just quickly to summarise, philanthropy is often thought of something that only the wealthy do, but people of all means can give, and workplace giving, which is donating to charities through your employer's payroll, is a growing form of giving. It's really easy to do. Many companies offer it, and they offer it in particularly innovative and interesting ways in terms of being able to engage and do it easily. It has benefits in terms of when you do your tax return, getting all your donations summarised in your payment summary, or equivalent now that we don't actually have payment summaries. So it has lots of benefits, and it's a really interesting and emerging area, and not one that perhaps gets as much focus as it should. And that's why we've partly got this webinar to talk about innovative ways to grow workplace giving. And I'll introduce our panel now, and then I'll just very briefly sort of provide some basic data on where we're at in terms of workplace giving in Australia before we go into a discussion. And then at 1:40 p.m, we'll open it up for a discussion with everybody. So yeah, put your comments and questions in the chat function, and we'll be really keen to dive into them from 1:40 p.m. onwards. So in terms of our panel, I don't know where they're located on your screen, so I'll just go where they're located on my screen. I firstly want to introduce and really welcome Ariahne Thompson, who's the Workplace Giving and Corporate Engagement Manager at WWF-Australia. And Ariahne's been working there for the past 3 years on their workplace giving engagement, growing that part of their engagement, and has a background in marketing, communications and partnerships. And whilst undertaking a Masters of Global Development, Ariahne actually founded a workplace giving user group, which meets regularly to share knowledge about workplace giving practice and innovation. So it's fantastic to have you here, Ariahne. Thanks so much. We look forward to hearing your insights. And next, we have Lisa Grinham, who is the CEO of Good to Give. So Good to Give is a provider, advocate, supporter of workplace giving in Australia. Hope I've described it okay, Lisa. And following her appointment as CEO of Good to Give in 2012, Lisa's led the organisation through digital transformation, using technology to make workplace giving easier and making the engagement even more attractive for employers and employees, and has got a wealth of experience in a diverse range of corporate backgrounds. So it's fantastic to have Lisa here to share her and Good to Give's perspectives on innovation and the work that they do. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Danielle Maxwell, who's the director of the Findex Community Fund. And Findex is a provider of advisory and accounting services in Australia. And Danielle started with Findex in 2005 and has worked in a variety of different roles in the business, but most recently has been appointed director of the Findex Community Fund, so oversees a variety of functions in that role, but it includes oversight of Findex's workplace giving program, and we're really looking forward to your insights as well. So thank you so much. Great to have this panel here and really looking forward to the discussion. So before I do throw it to Lisa for the first question, I did want to just provide a very quick summary of where we're at in terms of workplace giving in Australia, based on some great data which Workplace Giving Australia has actually summarised in PDF form. And I will put a link in the chat in a moment about that. In terms of where we're at with workplace giving, based on the most recent ATO data, which is from the 2019 financial year, there's 200,000 people that donate through workplace giving, and donations are just under $45 million. The ATO data is not perfect, but the ATO data, so I will caveat with that. And the interesting thing is that in that year, there's actually a 22% increase in employers participating, a really sizable increase in employees as well. And the average donation was about $215 per annum. Since 2003, there's been over $700 million of funding distributed through workplace giving in Australia. But there's also a lot of potential to grow it. And that's what we're partly talking about here, how we can do that, in the sense that 33% of working Australians have access to workplace giving, but only 5% participate. So that could come across as quite low, but I also see it as an opportunity. So it's something that we can talk about how, through different innovations and approaches, we can increase that. So on that note, I would like to turn to Lisa first. And given your work with Good to Give, would you be able to share sort of a helicopter view of some of the innovations that you're seeing in terms of growing workplace giving, particularly within companies, how they're engaging their employees to use workplace giving to give more? That'd be great. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Krystian, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here, so thanks for the invitation. Look, the good news is that we're actually starting to see workplace giving become far more accepted, almost as a license to operate, which means that companies need to be offering a way for employees to donate to charities. And thanks to some really great innovative technology platforms, it has become much easier for companies to offer employees the choice of giving to any Australian charity, which is definitely the expectation of donors. And I think one of our insights is, because workplace giving is becoming more mainstream, the program managers within the corporates are taking not only a more strategic view to workplace giving, but they're also actually having some fun around raising money. So recently we had one client actually who created a campaign encouraging their people to give up the last hour of their pay, and they had nearly 20% of their staff donating. Now we've got another client who's taken that a step further and been a little bit bolder, and they've actually asked for their people to give up their pay for a day. Now, I love that idea, and it's really important something like that, though, is really backed from the CEO down, because it's a great ask, and it's something that can get people just to start making a donation through workplace giving. So that's exciting. We're going to talk about it a little bit later on, I know, but certainly the Giving Circles at Work pilot that we developed kind of about 18 months ago, that delivers on the growing trend for companies to look at how they can create innovative leadership programs that also deliver community benefits. So I know we'll touch on that a little bit later. And in line with that, we're also seeing some companies looking at how they can build in employee giving, and that can be donating, that can be volunteering, that can be fundraising into their KPIs. So companies are sort of wanting to stretch their people and understand what they're doing by taking initiatives themselves to actually sort of learn to grow in their roles and how they can contribute to the overall culture of the organisation. So one of the other innovations, which been around for quite some time, been taking a little bit of while to get a bit of traction, but we're seeing a few companies do it, is what we're calling an opt-out workplace giving program. So for those of you that don't know, that's usually when an employee joins an organisation and they are automatically opted into the workplace giving program, and they're usually signed up for a fairly small amount, so it might be sort of $5 or $10 a month, and then they've got the opportunity to opt out, of course, but hopefully they stay in because they're so engaged with the program. So I think that that's a particularly exciting innovation. And then look, technology without doubt is allowing a lot more flexibility when it comes to matched funding. So as we all know, one of the great things about workplace giving is that most of the companies will actually match employee donations. But what we're seeing is, through the use of technology, it's become really easy for companies to do some exciting and fun stuff around double matching or triple matching campaigns. It might just be for a month or two, but that again involves a lot of extra people in giving, and also around disaster giving. So sadly, we've had the tragic bushfires followed by COVID. Now with the incredible humanitarian disaster that's unfolding in India, never before has been so important to enable these rapid response disaster appeals to be deployed really, really quickly. So I think, it's becoming more commonplace for companies to enact their disaster giving programs through workplace giving. And it also means that companies can then quarantine of some matching budget around for those disasters as well. So I think that's a really strong innovation and really important for the world in which we're living today. And just a few trends, I guess, we're seeing, not so much innovations, but certainly, giving the concept of giving champions, that's been around for a while as well. And we're starting to see companies pick up that a little bit more. And I think the exciting part about that is the more people that we've got thinking about different ways to actually engage in workplace giving or volunteering or fundraising, we're going to see more innovations coming out in this space. And that's exciting. I think data is the other one, and we're kind of in the early stages of data. So again, through the use of platform technology, companies can start to see where are their employees giving, what causes are they interested in, what can we do with that data to actually sort of increase and be more creative in our giving campaigns. So I think this is all exciting. And the last point is there's a lot more storytelling. So people using technology to actually tell the stories and to share why they give and why other people should give as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point about storytelling. We just launched Philanthropy Australia's blueprint to grow structured giving last week at the national conference, and storytelling has really come up about the importance of telling people about the impact of giving or the joy of giving. There's so many different aspects to it, and with the opt-out is really interesting too, because the application of behavioural insights in terms to sort of prompt people to join workplace giving. If you have to actually fill out a form or that sort of thing, you put it off, etc. Even if you actually want to do it. Whereas if you sort of, you opt out when you're starting at an employer, you can still opt out. You can still choose to, but there are some interesting sort of insights from behavioural studies that sort of show the benefits of that. And
I think also just on that behavioural insights is it's all about normalising giving. So, if 60% of the office or 70% of the office is doing it, people sort of feel like, well, it's something I should be doing. And they may not necessarily, initially be that engaged in giving, but if the company, I mean, this is why I'm so passionate about workplace giving, is I just think companies have got the opportunity to show incredible leadership in encouraging and educating people on the power of giving and why it's so good to give. So again, people might, initially get involved just because they think that's what everybody does. But during that process and during that journey of their giving, companies can educate and share with one. So giving, and that's a role that the charities can play as well in terms of the storytelling. So I think it's really, really important.
Speaking of the role of companies, Danielle, often we think that workplace giving is something that only sort of really large corporates do, and they're often the ones, and many of them do a great job. One's featured as sort of, doing a great job in that space. And, Findex has over 3,000 employees, so certainly not a small business, but it's not as large as some of the sort of large corporates that have tens of thousands of employees. So I'd be really interested in your insights about how Findex approaches workplace giving and approaches that you use to grow engagement from your employees in that regard.
Yeah, thanks, Krystian. It's a really interesting one. I think that hopefully I can provide some insight, because Findex's workplace giving program is still relatively new. We actually only launched it in 2018. So it's come a long way, I think, in that short time. We've had, I think, just over 50% of our staff voluntarily register for the platform, which I think is pretty good stats. And I've certainly made a note of some of the things, Lisa, that you mentioned with having to opt out of the program. So that's sort of doing things differently to, I suppose, how we've done, where it's been an organic growth. The other thing that I noted was the give up their pay for a day. I quite like that one as well. But for Findex, we've really done it through an organic approach and really used storytelling, as you mentioned, with our workplace giving internally. So the way that our workplace giving is set up is that our Findex Community Fund, which is our charitable entity, actually matches the donations of our Findex staff through our workplace giving program. And so when I say that we've done a lot of storytelling, it's been around our Findex Community Fund and driving engagement to that as a whole. because the way that we've set up the community fund is really a staff-led approach. And so if our staff aren't making donations through the workplace giving program, as for instance, then there's no donations going out via our Findex community fund in that particular program. So it's a very much aligned process for us to our charity. And I think that that's worked really well at engaging our people, because our unique offering is that we have offices in 100 locations around Australia and New Zealand, and 75% of those are regional. So we have a staff base that really want to give back locally where they're based. And I think that having a workplace giving program that offers 1,500 plus charities within the platform is important to them, because if it was restricted in a way that there was only a handful of charities that were available, it would probably be less successful, because they are likely unable to give to organisations that are really local to them. And something else I think that's worth noting in the way that we've handled our workplace giving program engagement is that we're having to continually adapt. So, we've gone through pre-COVID and then working from home, and then now, this balance in between. And we have to continually evolve the way that we're engaging people through workplace giving, because I think that we're finding staff are at the point where they're kind of like getting this engagement fatigue. They, are less likely to opt into the internal webinars and things like that. So we have to continually find ways to engage them. So is that video content? Is it, going back to the old connection days and making sure that we've got a dynamic enough workforce that they're actually connecting and that they've got that people element. So I guess from that perspective, it's just about continually evolving with the level of engagement within the business. And then the third thing I think for us is that being that we're still quite new, we had quite a lot of donations aligned to when we have campaigns. So we hold a Findex Giving Week, which is where we not only match but double match the donations for a week, and try and drive as many donations through the workplace giving program as we can during that campaign. And that works really well, but what that does mean is that we get a bit of a plateau then after that. So we get the peaks and troughs. So it's about introducing a more regular calendar so that there is a bit more of a constant awareness behind the workplace giving and just keeping it at the forefront of people's minds.
Yeah, and it's great to have gotten the helicopter view from Lisa, and then you even getting some ideas for innovations from what Lisa said. And the points you made around the importance of storytelling, how it's staff-led, and the role of choice. Because I remember when I was working in government and a department whose I won't name, and I thought, I might see what workplace giving opportunities they had, and that is not very good website on the intranet with a list of 5 charities you could give to and send an email to this email address at the payroll department. I'm like, well, I wonder if they're actually trying to get me not to do it because the way that it was actually structured, because I didn't do it.
Funky and not easy to use. It needs to be really, it needs to be easy. Otherwise people aren't going to do it.
And the point around continued improvement as well is such a great one in terms of, and that's what we're talking about too, about innovation, because there is that fatigue as well. And this year we've got that sort of post-2020 fatigue, I think, as well. And I think that need to continue to be looking at how we can change things or adapt is a great point. And speaking of sort of, that, Ariahne, we were really, keen when we were organising this webinar to have a not just sort of employers or academics, in my case, sort of on this panel, but actually have charity representatives as well, given that, they're sort of, just as important to this, to growing workplace giving in Australia, and charities are the organisations that workplace giving benefits, and so they can make the contribution to the community that they do. And it'd be really fascinating to hear your perspective working in a well-known charity such as WWF-Australia in terms of how you go about working with employers and employees to grow workplace giving, and also really interested to hear in the workplace giving user group that you set up, which is a really great initiative, and sort of what's come out of that.
Yeah, sure. So there's probably 3 main things that I'll mention. In another life, I worked in the for-profit space, managing charity partnerships and foundation grants for a fairly sizable retailer. And when I came to WWF, I genuinely cringed at some of the misconceptions that I'd held while I was on that side of things. And what I've realised working in the not-for-profit space is that we just have so much to bring to the table when working with businesses. And when it comes to workplace giving, being a part of your workplace giving program means that employees have a tangible connection to causes that they care about, and they get to be a part of that every day when they come to work. And that's just such a special thing to be able to offer. So Krystian, you mentioned before that workplace giving is sometimes a channel that maybe doesn't have the resources or doesn't have the focus that perhaps it should. Keeping that in mind has really allowed me to apply a level of creativity to the channel that I perhaps wouldn't if I didn't have both sides of the perspective. The second thing is the approach to workplace giving that's been most successful for us has been really nailing down that regular giving strategy side of things. When I first came to WWF, workplace giving for us was kind of a combination of regular giving and more broadly employee engagement. So my focus became building a really robust regular giving strategy that was going to weather periods where things like volunteering and engagement programs perhaps weren't so viable, which was well timed considering we then had COVID where those face-to-face experiences just weren't happening. So by that stage, we really looked at the data, like you mentioned with Lisa. We developed content and we'd really considered what our current partners and prospective partners might want. And so we had a really strong workplace giving channel that was able to survive despite the obvious challenges. And it's now given us the space to really start expanding on that offering again. Developing new activities, looking at volunteering opportunities again, and creating a holistic workplace giving program. And yeah, just the third thing I'll mention with the user group, I guess, is connecting with people in the space. Having really good relationships with your platforms, so Good to Give, Good Company, Mojo, but all of them. Having really great relationships with those platforms has allowed us to trial some of the new tech that's coming up and really experiment with some of the functionality that exists on those platforms. And then connecting with other counterparts in the industry. So I've been a part of establishing just a small workplace giving user group that's allowed us to come together and share challenges and insights. A lot of people are working on workplace giving kind of alongside other priorities like corporate partnerships, community fundraising. So having a space where we're able to come together and talk specifically about that channel has just been really beneficial.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ariahne. It's the workplace user group sharing that kind of information and practice is a fantastic initiative, and some really interesting insights in terms of what you've been doing at WWF Australia as well. And also on the subject of opt-out, just coming back to that, Jenny Geddes from Workplace Giving Australia has just provided in the comments a link to a case study about how opt-out can be used. And it's really interesting. It's one of a number of many different innovations. One sort of limitation of it is it can't be used for existing employees. So if you're an existing employee, your employer can't just say, we are going to take some of your pay and put it into workplace giving. And there's reasons for that in the sort of employment laws. But for new employees, it is something that can be used. And there's a really interesting case study there by Energy Australia that Jenny has linked to. And just sort of coming back to you, Lisa, you mentioned the Giving Circles at Work pilot, and I did the evaluation in my capacity as a fellow at the Centre for Social Impact at Swinburne. So obviously I was closely involved in that and very passionate about it, whilst remaining objective in terms of the evaluation. It was a really interesting initiative, and it'd be great to get some insights about it. And just for the audience, in terms of what a giving circle is, before Lisa can explain sort of how it worked in the particular pilot. A giving circle is basically a group of people that come together, pool donations, and then use those donations to make a grant collectively and make a collective decision about how that grant will be made. And they're quite common in the US and elsewhere. There's a number of giving circles in Australia. and focus on different areas, some quite large, some smaller, some cause specific. It's a great way of getting engaged in sort of a more structured approach to giving, where you make a grant of say $5,000 or $10,000 or dollars more collectively, can be a more engaging and interesting process than if you're, not that there's anything wrong with that. I make a small donation every month and it's really important, but where you're just sort of making a donation, smaller donations. So yeah, it's a really interesting approach in general, but this pilot sort of trialed in a workplace setting. So it'd be great to get your insights about that, Lisa.
Thank you. And look, it was something that, like you, I was very passionate about, and the idea floated into my head about 7 years ago, and it took probably nearly 5.5 years to get the funding, and we were very grateful for funding from the Department of Social Services to actually take this pilot and then have the evaluation done by CSI Swinburne and have Westpac as our pilot business to work with. So really, really exciting initiative, and part of the reason that I thought that it was a concept that was really worthwhile trying in the workplace is, as you say, it takes it a step further from just making a donation. So the beauty of a giving circle is that you get a group of people who Krystian said are interested in a particular cause, and in some cases, particularly in the workplace, we found that some groups wanted to be charity specific. So then they would look at different charity projects and come together as a group to choose which charity project they would support. But the big part about it was that rather than just sort of making that 50, or in most cases, the donations that people making through a giving circle was higher than their regular donation. And in fact, pre and post the pilot, we found that donations increased by 43%. So people wanted to make a donation, but they really wanted to understand, what's the problem that these charities are trying to solve. They were looking at a particular cause area. And so why do these charities exist? Understanding why they have the different programs and the different need for those programs. Understanding actually how a charity operates. What are some of the challenges that charities are actually facing? And I think, Ariahne's point of view around having, an understanding on the corporate side, but then actually coming into not-for-profit and having a different perspective again. And, for many of the corporates we work with, they're also looking for opportunities to support their people to go on to not-for-profit boards. And for anybody that's listening in on this webinar that's part of a not-for-profit, it's really valuable when somebody puts their hand up and says, we'd love to join your board, if they've got an actual understanding of the not-for-profit sector. So, for a lot of the corporates, they saw this, the concept of giving circles at work as potentially a leadership program as well. So, and we definitely found that through the evaluation that we did, that people felt that they had a much greater understanding of the not-for-profit sector out of the experience. So the other thing that was really interesting in the pilot was that Westpac has what they call employee action groups. And for a lot of the large corporates, this is quite a similar approach. They might call them special interest groups, but they could be focused around Indigenous issues. They could be focused on the youth network or women's leadership. So they have these special interest groups, and often those groups actually do have some interaction with different charities working in that space. But what happens is that they can get overwhelmed with charities coming to them and saying, so say it's the Indigenous Action Group, and they might have a lot of charities saying, hey, we'd love your support. They don't actually have a way to sort of manage those applications. So something like a giving circles at work concept allows them to actually then say to these charities, we've got this great established program, and at the end of the year, we'll be going out to ask for expressions of interest to apply for funding. And, that funding can, as Krystian said, be, it's early days, it could be anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000, because, there's no limit in terms of how many people can actually get involved in the giving circle. And I think also what's been fascinating is when we actually ran a pilot, we saw that a specific giving circle, if somebody started it in Sydney, so say it was the Westpac office in the city, it was most likely that the members who would join that giving circle came from that same office. But then COVID hit, and of course we've all gone home, and all of a sudden, you know, office locations seem to be a very artificial barrier. So, you know, so we're really excited for the future as, again, companies are looking at different ways to engage their workforces who have become decentralised, that giving circles at work are just a perfect opportunity to jump on Zoom and have a conversation. So very exciting.
Yeah, and there's a link there that Rhonda's posted to the evaluation, which I did, and it wasn't an objective evaluation in the sense that, you know, there was a survey done looking of employees of charities that received grants as well, and I did an extensive amount of interviews as well, and it shows sort of satisfaction and general sort of perceptions of it, but also identifies areas sort of that need further work, and areas that, you know, corporates, if they want to adopt this approach as part of the suite of things that they do to foster employee engagement and the contribution to the community, about, you know, things that they need to sort of, you know, focus on. For example, one thing came up about the real importance of getting sort of senior management to really endorse it, so that employees can tell their manager, well, I'm taking this time for this meeting because, you know, it's a priority for the organisation too, even though I've got other things to do. And so there was a variety of different learnings that are in there. So there's the full report with all the graphs and things that basically sort of, you know, occupied my time right in the middle of the lockdown last year. First one, not the second one we had in Melbourne. And but also a sort of more succinct summary. And I think we should perhaps, you know, I'll invite sort of Ariahne or Danielle if you want to add anything before we sort of just go to the Q&A. We've got a couple of questions that have come up already, but yeah, I'll you know, I'd just like to invite you if you want to make any additional comments before we do that.
I think for me, I think you guys have, yeah, touched on that really well.
Great. And Ash asked how much was raised through the pilot program. So it was a small pilot with not a huge amount of employees. So it was $45,000 donated to 9 charities. So it was a small targeted pilot. It was, so we're not talking in hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars here. But given
you ran over a 6-month period as well. So,
and there were various extraneous factors as well that sort of probably had an impact on it. But you know, looking in terms of the data around sort of employee perceptions, etc., it shows a lot of promise. And
I think also one point that was really interesting is that 60% of the people that participated in the pilot had never given through workplace giving before. So you're actually, you know, attracting new people to give through workplace giving. And then once the pilot actually concluded, 23% of those people continued making donations to those charities. So, you know, really positive uplift from that perspective.
And in terms of other questions, we've got one from, hopefully pronounce your name right, Janina Yanchu or Janina. I'm sorry if I get that wrong. But I think this might be one for Ariahne possibly. If you're new to workplace giving as a fundraising channel, what advice do you have for those charities that are new to it? I think you're well placed to sort of have a go at that one.
Oh, I think the major challenge with workplace giving from a charity perspective is knowing exactly who the donors are. So we don't know exactly who our donors are. We don't know who the individuals that are donating are. We can make estimated guesses, and we can know a little bit about who they are based on, you know, the corporate or the business that we're working with. But that's definitely the major challenge. So developing content that is going to engage those donors, you know, quite broadly, it is important. I think the other thing is knowing which businesses are focused on your cause. So, you know, if someone's focused on sustainability, then that's obviously going to be someone that we're going to pitch to or approach, because we know that they're more viable and they're likely to be interested in the work that we're doing. So being quite strategic about who we pitch to is another major thing. And I think the third one is finding the right people. So sometimes workplace giving is managed by HR, sometimes it's managed by CSR people, sustainability people. It can be, you know, in all sorts of areas. So doing the legwork to find who your right contact is going to make the process a lot quicker and easier for you.
I would also just add on around that transparency that that's probably something that's good, certainly with our technology platform. Unless donors request to be anonymous, we actually do provide all the donor information. So we provide their name, their contact details, the amount that they've given, whether or not the company they're attached to, and whether or not it's been matched. But even if the donor does actually request to be anonymous, you can still upload welcome messages and thank you messages, regular messages into our platform, and those messages will be alerted into your donors. So they may not have said that they want you to contact them directly, but we felt very passionate about that because we think it's really important that charities have got the opportunity to acknowledge and to thank donors. So even if the donor has said that they don't want us to publish their details, we make sure that any information that's loaded by the charities into our platform makes it directly to their donors.
And I suppose
that's a great functionality that Good to Give has, Lisa. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's a question from Matt about sort of tech solutions to help employees and employers sort of make workplace giving easier, and whether there's any suggestions for external resources that can be used for that purpose. Obviously, there's the Good to Give platform, but Ariahne, Danielle, which platform do you use? A particular platform? Do you use?
We use Good to Give, yeah.
And Ariahne, you mentioned there were some other ones, like just sort of which other ones sort of do you have exposure to as a provider, as a charity that engages with workplace giving?
Yeah, so Good to Give's a major one. Good Company is another major one that we use. Bonojo, Benevity. We're finding, particularly during the bushfire period, where there was businesses wanting to donate from international offices. There's Your Cause. There's a lot of kind of third-party organisations like CAF, the Charities Aid Foundation. There's a lot of other ones kind of springing up now, but those four main ones are the ones that we use. And then obviously we have a lot of businesses that just run their own payroll giving program. And they're usually the ones that we struggle to communicate with the most because we can't we don't have the functionality of Good to Give to share those thank you messages.
I think it would have been the website of that department where the list of charities, sort of that type of organisation. And I understand smaller organisations, that wasn't a small one, might struggle there. And you mentioned Bonojo, Good Company, and Ash from Good Company is in the webinar too, and he's commented as well. And Lisa, you very helpfully sort of provided some tools for charities as well, which is great, especially for those ones that are getting started. And there was also another question from Anna Jane about Linka about, is there a way to find out if a company has a workplace giving program? I think that's probably from the perspective of a charity as opposed to an employee, because if you're an employee, you can obviously ask or look up your internet, etc. But yeah, I mean, obviously, some companies will sort of say they do on their website, etc. And if you're on a platform, then the platform will show, I imagine, which companies have, or how does it work? Yeah, it'd be good to sort of demystify that a little bit. I don't know, maybe Lisa, if you want to have a go at that one.
Sure. Well, look, if certainly we are happy to share who are some of the companies that we're working with. There's a number on our website, not everybody's on there, but we don't necessarily do sort of specific introductions, otherwise that would take a lot of time, but yeah, certainly but as you say, look, most of the companies, if they're offering the platform to their employees, will put it on their website, so that's often a good place to go.
Yeah, we certainly I suppose talk about it in our content calendars through social media, and also the Findex Community Fund and our workplace gifting program is on our website. And I think that for an organisation that's probably of a slightly bigger size, generally it's a really great thing, and it makes them an employer of choice. I think that people onboarding talent, companies onboarding talent now, there's almost an expectation that there's a workplace giving program involved. So I think that if you can't find it somewhere on an organisation's website, perhaps they're quite small of an organisation, or they won't have one, because yeah, I think that it's something that most organisations would talk about in some way, shape or form.
And it's a really interesting point, Danielle, too. And there's research showing in terms of employees, particularly in the younger cohort that are entering the workforce, they see sort of, you know, their work not as just some, obviously this is generalization, but they see their work as not just somewhere where they get you know, they go work and get paid, but, you know, they work and they make a contribution through that, and obviously they get paid, etc. But there's also other things that they achieve, and they can work to, you know, they want to feel part of a company that's doing a positive thing in the community through the services and products they deliver, but also the other contributions that they make to the community. And you know, workplace giving is part of that broader suite of corporate social responsibility, so-called sort of strategies that can be used. And I teach a unit on corporate social responsibility at CSI Swinburne as part of our postgraduate program. So, you know, we look at those sorts of things, and it's yeah, it's a really good point about how employees, you know, they look at these sorts of things when they're joining companies. And I suppose one thing I would just add is that a way to find out too is through sort of talking to other people, talking to, you know, employees. If you come across an employee somewhere and they might say, we've got a program, etc., or if they don't know if they do, they might ask their company why they don't have one, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And for employees onboarding now, I think it's almost, it's becoming expected, as I said, and it's about almost aligning their values as an employee with what the employer's values are. So yeah, I think that plays a really big part in that recruitment process now.
And Sarah Kelly's got a really interesting question, as Rhonda commented as well. It's a bit of a tricky one. Is there a view on having a small number of charity partners versus a complete open choice model in terms of or particular focus areas in terms of you know, employee engagement, balancing the administration aspect, etc.? You know, be keen to get all the views of the panelists on that question. Perhaps maybe start with a charity perspective, Ariahne, because obviously, you know, the more charities that can be on in a program, the more access there is, but at the same time, then there probably sort of, you know, downsides to that as well. It's a balance. So I'd be interested in get your perspective, and then the other panelists as well.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, the less other charities on the group, the better for us. Just because I do find with the smaller closed programs, it's easier for us to share communication and content, and we know that that's going to be passed down to the employees and to our donors. On the bigger programs, I do find some businesses and corporates don't do any internal communication at all, and so we can't provide them with any content. And others, we just don't really know, you know, we're kind of competing with what their internal calendars look like, what they might be focusing on, and we just don't really know what's being passed on and what's not. So yeah, from my perspective, the less the better, but that's obviously there's downsides with that for the employees. Yeah,
and obviously it means sort of having to get into that group that is there.
Exactly.
Which is, you know, presents other, you know, challenges and opportunities. Lisa, interested in your perspective, because I understand your platform provides various options, and, you know, you cater to different employers that want to do different things, but I'd be interested in what your insights and what you see through the clients that you work with.
Yeah. So look, we take a view that you know, every company you know, they need to understand their culture and their organisation to create any sort of you know, employee engagement program, whether it's, you know, workplace giving or volunteering or fundraising or whatever it is, that they understand their business and their brands and their business objectives. So we've got companies that just say, hey, here's and I think we've got about 2,500 on charities, and then there's probably another 1,000 projects underneath those that people can choose from. So they've got some companies that just say, you know, just go for it. And we have a number of search filters, you know, within the platform as well, so that people can hone it down. And then we've got some companies who will go the other extreme and just say, look, we've only got, you know, there's half a dozen or there's 10 charities that we want to focus on because that's what aligns with our business. Most of the companies we deal with, though, and this is probably the model that we try to encourage because it's where we see the greatest level of engagement, is for companies to choose a set of charity partners that they want to engage with, and engage with in a more strategic way. So workplace giving is one element, but generally speaking, the business will understand what are the needs of that charity, and can we get our staff involved in volunteering for that particular charity, and then they also will open up the platform, the other 2,500 charities that people can give to. And I think I said before that I think that one of the great opportunities for companies in this space is to provide leadership, and you'll get people who have been touched by something and they know exactly the charity they want to give to. You'll have other people that might be interested in a particular cause, may not know who they want to give to, and they can do a bit of a search and find out. Then you've got those people that think, like, I'd actually like to give somewhere, but I haven't, nothing's particularly touched me at this point. So I'm actually going to look to my company for leadership in that space, and who are they working with, and understand, why this particular charity is great. So, for us, as I said, happy to support what any company wants, but we probably find the most success around that hybrid model. So, and the platform can highlight what the charity partners are. And then you've got all the other charities that you can search by cause area. You can search by the most popular amongst your peers. So there's a lot of different sort of search functionality in there.
And like a lot of these things, there's no right or wrong answer here, and there are trade-offs either way. But it's about sort of the company doing what it works for them and their employees as well, and obviously important to think of the charities that are actually get these funds and actually deliver the benefit in the community. And Danielle, interested in the approach that Findex takes in this regard.
Yeah, thank you. So I think something that Lisa mentioned when answering this question was just around what giving culture exists. And I think that that's probably important if it's something that you're new and just setting up, is to have a feel or a strategy as to what type of giving culture you're trying to create within the business. So for us, we, again, it aligns to our charity, which is supporting focus areas of health, education and entrepreneurship. So for us, our workplace giving program matches donations in those focus areas. They are, of course, able to donate to any charity that they want, again, because with that broad footprint, people generally want to give back to causes that resonate with them and, and are local to them. So there needs to be, in my view, that option. Otherwise, you're at risk of excluding people. But I think from your business and setting up your giving culture, I think that it's important to define what the business's values are, so that you can make the most impact in those areas. Otherwise, it's just such a widespread and probably smaller impact that you're making. I think that just helps refine it a little bit.
Yeah, well, the importance of having that sort of focus but having that flexibility in the approach that you adopt is a really good one. And I think the point around sort of not excluding particular charities is an important one too, because there are charities that do really important work in underserved areas or in issues that don't receive as much of a focus, and they might be emerging, or they just and so by having the option where employees can still give to them through a sort of a hybrid approach is a really interesting one. And I imagine, and I'm not, maybe Lisa, you can correct me, that there is probably a skew towards larger organisations as part of sort of and look, there is a skew in giving in general, sort of in terms of the amount of giving that goes to larger organisations, but sort of there is that hybrid flexibility. Then, and not that I'm endorsing it particularly, but then if someone has a small charity that they want to support, or a less well-known one, they still do have that option.
Look, definitely some of, it's the big brand names that people recognise that certainly do attract, significant dollars, not only in workplace giving, but in other fundraising channels as well. But I think, something that, the Philanthropy Australia blueprint has touched on is the importance and growing importance of place-based giving. And I think certainly we're seeing that that as well. And I think the pandemic has contributed to that, as people sort of are spending a lot more time, you know, where they live. And so I think that that is definitely going to be a growing trend, and that typically is going to be more, you know, small grassroots organisations. I think the other thing that's quite interesting was also around disaster giving. And look, I can remember some research we did, it was back in 2011, for those of you that can remember back in those days, and it was after the, you know, the tsunami and the earthquake in New Zealand and the earthquake and tsunami in Japan. So we had 3 major disasters, and you know, back then, mostly companies would choose one charity to support during a disaster. And we did a big piece of research. And I remember at the time, I think we had more than about 1,200 donors that came back. And overwhelmingly, people said that they wanted choice in who to give to during disasters. So, and we've you know, we took that immediately, and that's built into the platform. So it's really easy for companies to, you know, put up a number of different charities. You can even, like, there's this, which I think is such a fun little tool. You can sort of, you know, have like 4 charities highlighted, and you can just, you know, pick $100 and you can have it spread across all those 4 charities if you want to. So it's, again, it just makes it really easy. But I think, you know, giving people choice is absolutely critical these days.
And we've got a couple of questions which I think will round out our session, because we've got 5 minutes left, so might get really quick answers to them so that we can answer both of them. There was one question from Alison McInerney about any thoughts about how to cater to small business owners who might be setting out and wanting to support charities, noting that the definition of a small business can actually be up to 200 employees, or there's another definition based on turnover of under $2 million a year, so I won't get into those definitions. But I might actually ask, Ariahne, do you have any perspective from the user group that you've got, or sort of as a charity, have you got much engagement with real, like, small, like, you know, up to 200 employee type organisations, or is it, or not so much?
Yeah, so we do have a little bit of an offering for, you know, we call them small to medium enterprises, but are looking at working within that space, and we try to reverse engineer workplace giving into any kind of work that we do with corporates or smaller businesses. A lot of those smaller businesses don't have official programs set up though. So we do find that we need to be a little bit more creative in providing give back solutions. So we might say once or twice a year, we'll support you with an employee fundraiser, and we'll come in and, you know, do a lunch and learn or something like that. So we have to be just a little bit more creative as we work with them on the path towards setting up an official program, but not quite being there yet.
It's a really interesting insight, because I think, you know, in terms of the question from Alison about how, you know, a small business, it might be about, you know, picking a charity and approaching them and saying, we'd like to direct our donations to you, or, you know, and it's sort of, you know, that's a way they can start a partnership. And obviously there's, you know, you won't run it for them, etc. But it's there is that kind of approach to doing it. And I think that that's a really interesting insight. And I'm just mindful of the time, and I do want to get to the very last question. And we might not be able to get sort of all the panelists' perspectives on it, but it's from Andrea about what are the top 3 actions that you would suggest a medium-sized company can do to increase workplace giving engagement. Companies, the program's 3 years old, and there's 4 charities that you can contribute to each year. So thank you for the very specific question, Andrea. But in terms of, Lisa, I might just sort of finish with you about, you know, obviously, you know, this is, you don't know the company and all that sort of thing, but any kind of particular insights, and then, you know, Danielle, if you might sort of chip in as well, that'd be great. But we need to be very quick because we're really up against it with time.
Look, I think if you've got just 4 charities, then you've got that opportunity to create sort of really strong engagement, you know, get-togethers or Zooms with those charities, so that, you know, the staff can really understand the work that the charities do. And if you find you're not getting the pickup and the engagement, then you might need to go back to staff and you know, understand whether or not these charities and these causes are really resonating with the staff. Thanks so much, Lisa. And Danielle, obviously you're a larger employer, but you know, any perspectives that you've got?
Yeah, I think I agree with what Lisa said in regards to engagement and having a message that can really resonate with people so that they understand this is what this cause is about. I think also potentially having a really specific and visible fundraising calendar, perhaps, so that you know that at these times, this is when you're fundraising, because I think that there is a potential for fundraising fatigue within organisations as well, so that people might get, you know, sick of contributing. And I think that also just looking at your data to understand what timing works best for people. Like generally, as you're coming up to pay review time, it's not a good time to ask people for money. So, you know, just considering when your time is, generally people are really quite giving around Christmas time. So just having a calendar that's really clear and visible for your people to understand this is when we're going to do it based on what your fundraising goals are.
And we're just under nearly at 2 p.m, so I might sort of wrap things up, you know, and I'll just sort of add in terms of Andre, look, there's the case study I mentioned from Workplace Giving Australia about opt-out, you know, have a look at that as well. You know, we talked about a range of different things today, clearly sort of the importance of relationships and storytelling, the role of staff leadership and engagement as part of, you know, designing a program, and the importance of choice, but that there's, you know, different approaches to doing it, and pros and cons, and the need to have, you know, continued improvement and nimbleness from companies and corporates, but also charities, and the work that Ariahne and her colleagues at other charities are doing in terms of, like you mentioned, sort of reverse engineering to make it fit, for example. That kind of responsiveness is so important as well. And we are now on 2 p.m. exactly. So I did want to, you know, really thank the audience for coming, of course, but the panelists so much for coming and sharing your insights and perspectives. It was a really interesting discussion. I've learned things, had great questions and comments as well. And thank you so much. And also want to thank Rhonda, who does so much work at the Centre for Social Impact across so many different things, including running these webinars. Rhonda's been running these webinars since almost the beginning of 2020 last year, one a month, and a lot of work goes into it. Rhonda and her colleagues really want to, you know, say thank you for the work that you do. It's so important as part of our mission at the Centre for Social Impact to really engage. And, you know, we're not just about doing research sort of in a university and not engaging. We want to, you know, do research that makes a difference. And once again, thanks so much, and have a lovely day.